So the Army is constantly complaining about, oh, we have so many injuries. Why do we have all these injuries? Why are we now, when guys get out, paying them thousands of dollars from the VA? Well, that's because it all goes down to training. It's all training.
You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast. I'm Scott Hambrick, and that over there's Nick. I don't talk about him yet. I'm talking about Matt, because Matt is wearing the same shirt I'm wearing. And
the new Barbell Logic tees.
Yeah, and we're Twinkies today.
Yeah, these aren't on the website yet. So we're holding them back because we got a new website that's launching, which might be launched by the time this podcast comes out, but probably about the same time.
Same URL, different look.
Yeah, barbelllogic.com, and it's beautiful. The new website's beautiful. It's basically done. We're just going through and making sure that, we have to go through and kind of reformat every single post we've ever made, which is like 200 articles.
Right.
And 250 podcasts, or whatever we've got. So we just got to go in and clean that up a little bit. And when we do that, we'll launch the new T-shirts and tanks and stuff, so that gives people an additional reason to go to that website. So here we are, looking good in our gray.
Right.
Feeling good this morning.
I like the gray, because when I sweat the pits up, everybody knows that I'm working.
Oh, I know your back. My whole back, this shirt goes from like a medium gray to like a dark charcoal when you work out in it, because it sweats and it just turns that gray. Those gray shirts, they just turn almost like black because they get so wet with the back sweat. But we also have we already have the dark charcoal shirt. So if you are a big sweater, then it won't show the sweat marks as bad. So they're great shirts, soft.
And today we have Nick Koldewey with us, and we're going to talk about training for the armed forces and first responders. So I'm going to piss everybody off. You ready?
Huge surprise.
First responders.
Uh-huh.
I've got a friend who was a mayor of a town here in Oklahoma, and anytime anybody says first responders, it makes me think of this. So they got a fire department, because everybody has a fire department, because, that's our worst fear, I guess.
Right.
Fire.
Maybe with volunteers, right? The small towns are nothing but volunteer firemen.
Right. Everybody's volunteer firemen. And so they got all these firemen, and mostly they lift weights and make barbecue and wait. So, they need to justify their budget. So they decide, well, they're going to respond to every motor vehicle accident.
Oh, yeah, right.
And then 18 months later, they need more money and whatever. But under the Hambrick plan, what we're going to do is we're going to sell all the fire department equipment and real estate. We're going to take that budget, and we're going to take all the assets, the money from this asset sale. We're going to put it all in a fund. We're going to take their annual budget. We're going to put that all in a fund. We're going to invest it. And then when your house burns down, one guy in a Toyota Prius is going to go over there, and he's going to put like a yellow tape around it and not let anybody get burned. And then we're just going to pay you out of that fund.
Right. Give you the house.
Yeah.
It's basically like homeowners insurance.
Yeah. Oh, your house burned? Oh, here's $283,000. That's what it was on the tax rolls. Here you go. The foundation's still there. The plumbing's still stubbed up. Best of luck to you in the future.
Right.
Way cheaper.
Yeah. Be a lot of insurance fraud, though, on that deal. That used to happen when I grew up outside of Memphis and West Memphis, Arkansas.
Right.
These people would burn their houses down constantly for to get the insurance money on the deal. Constant. Arson was this. Oh man, insurance fraud was crazy. This is like in the mid '80s.
Right.
Everybody needed to buy crack, so they would burn their house down, take out the insurance policy, burn their house down, and then buy a bunch of crack with the money.
There were two brothers that I knew in Catoosa, Oklahoma, in the 80s and 90s, that if you're getting behind on your car payment or any of that kind of stuff, they just make that shit go away. They'd burn your house down, steal your car, run it in the river, whatever you needed for like a 6-pack of PBR. It was pretty cheap.
I had a guy who he was one of my wife's friends' husbands. They're not that great of friends anymore, but he sat down and he was a good old boy from the Southwest Virginia, and he explained to me how he did this, basically rig the car so it would slide down the hill and then end up in the river, and they got the money out of it. And I'm just sitting here staring, and I'm like, dude, I'm a cop. You realize that, right? He's like, oh yeah, well, it was an accident. I was like, yeah, okay, buddy.
So what do you think of the handbrake plan for the fire departments, Nick? I'll
I
put
don't
you
know.
on the
I'm not a
spot.
fireman.
Well, perfect.
Yeah, so it's great.
All firemen.
I will say I will stick up for the fire department here for a second and say that probably 90% of the time they're responding to every accident is because every person that gets into an accident is injured.
Right.
And what I mean by injured is they're like, are you hurt? And it's like, no. And then they're like, well, my neck kind of hurts. And then the fire department they have to respond. So it's the citizens you need to fix, Scott.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Well, they are who they are, so we have to react to who they are.
Let's let Nick. So Nick is. Well, actually, I won't even. You tell us who you are, and why you have the authority to speak on such topics today. And so, give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. So let's see. Went to college, Southwest Virginia.
Oh, you are in fact a Southwest Virginia boy. I don't know if I want. I'm not sure I want you to work for me now. Those people are crazy out there. You guys are like mountain people.
Yeah, that's right. That's where the beard comes from. I grew up in Northern Virginia, so I went to high school in Northern Virginia, which is.
Where's the accent? What the hell happened to that thing?
What do you mean?
You don't have an accent.
No.
Well, Northern Virginia is like D.C. area.
It's like DC
yes,
area.
right. So, but you start getting into Southwest Virginia and then Western Virginia and Eastern Tennessee. Then just the further west you get until you cross over the mountains and get back to the plains, you're just more and more like a hillbilly. Is that the way it works?
I guess. I don't know.
Hey, wait a minute. I live in the Ozarks. It's the same thing, right? So, like Tulsa's not in the Ozarks at all, right? So Scott's 2.5 hours west of me. Not at all in the Ozarks. Springfield, Missouri is on the west side of the Ozarks, and it's beautiful. And an hour south of here is Bentonville, Arkansas, and it's like Walmart headquarters, and there's billionaires everywhere, and Teslas all over the place. And the further you go east, you eventually run into the Boot Hill of Missouri, what they call the Boot Hill, right? That little bottom hangy down thing. It's like the uvula of Missouri. The back of Missouri's hot, sweaty, humid throat. And the closer you get to that, the more hillbilly it gets. I assume so. I'm on the west side of the hillbillies. You're on the east side of the hillbillies.
Yeah, I mean, I can pretty much see West Virginia from where I'm at right now. So
nice. So all right. So you go to school. You're from Northern Virginia. So you're Thomas Jefferson, born and raised, and then you moved in with the hillbillies.
That's right. So when I graduated college, I was commissioned into the Army as a second lieutenant, and I was commissioned as an infantry officer. So from there, they send you to beautiful Fort Benning, Georgia, and down there you go through a course called Infantry Basic Officers Leadership Course, or IBOLIC is what we call it.
Catchy.
Yeah, and it's 4 months, and you basically spend probably about 3.5 of those months in the field, learning infantry tactics and stuff and how to lead troops and formations. And then you go off to Ranger School. So 3 days after I graduated IBOLIC, I went to Ranger School, and Ranger School is 62 days. If you're blessed, you can recycle or start it all over again if you mess something up during the training. I was really lucky and made it all the way through my first time. After Ranger School, this is 2014, I was moved to Fort Campbell in Kentucky. It's the headquarters is technically in Kentucky, but it sits on Kentucky and Tennessee. So I lived in Tennessee, and it's like right outside Nashville, like 45 minutes to an hour. And let's see, right when I got to Fort Campbell, I pretty much was there for like 4 months. I was assigned as an infantry platoon leader, and then I got deployed to Afghanistan.
What year is that?
That was 2014. So I graduated Ranger School, got to my unit, got a platoon, deployed me pretty quickly. So, and then I was in Afghanistan for 9 months, and then I came back, worked in a different leadership position as a heavy weapons platoon leader, which is like a specialty platoon.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, you get a lot of big guns. It's pretty cool.
Literally.
So I was did that. And then I left the Army in 2017, moved back to Northern Virginia, and became a police officer. Went through the academy, became a police officer, and then I was a police officer for 2 years.
I would assume going through the academy was a breeze after going through the 62 days of trying to become a ranger.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, this is not so difficult.
No. Yeah, the academy it was not as difficult as things that I've done in the past. We'll just say that for sure. So yeah, I was a police officer for 2 years. I worked right outside of DC in a pretty not so nice area. So it was a lot of fun. And then I actually just resigned from the police department this year, and now I'm working in the private sector.
Private sector security for what? For business people, congressmen, all that stuff?
Directly, I work basically as the security directly under a CEO of a major corporation.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so I work directly under him, and I'm basically like his security detail.
So what are we going to talk about today? What's the problem with all this is that I think you've been exposed to some issues there.
Yeah, so since we had talked about this, Matt, I'd been taking a lot of thought about it, and I think I should preface this whole thing with the big thing in these organizations, the military and law enforcement and first responders, is experience. So length of experience is a big deal. You know, like, oh, you did 20 years here, you did 30 years there, whatever. So I already know that there's anybody that listens to this is going to be shaking their head kind of like, oh man, he only had 4 years in the Army and then 2 years as a cop. I mean, the reality is I left the police department pretty much as a rookie. So I'm aware of that. However, I look at this as more like a chance as me bringing a message. There's a lot of talk on the outside of these communities about how the military could do things better. The law enforcement needs to be fitter and all this stuff. And I look at myself as the guy who was on the inside and now is on the outside in a very, in an organization that provides training for people and has a unique perspective on it. So I'm the messenger. That's how I look at this.
Sure.
I'm not going to sit. I've had experience in both organizations, but I'm not going to sit back and, say I did 30 years, 20 years here, because obviously I haven't.
I would argue that the longer someone sat in one of those organizations, the less likely they'd be to troubleshoot it and fix the damn thing.
Sure.
It's like that anywhere.
Yeah, that's part of the problem, Scott. Starting with the military, everybody wants to talk about the PT tests, right? Everyone's always talking about the PT tests. They're always saying, oh man, it's outdated and it's worthless and blah, blah, blah. And you know what? Some of that stuff might be true, to be honest with you. The current Army physical fitness test, the APFT, was developed in 1980. And it's just push-ups, sit-ups, and a 2-mile run. And now they're coming out with this new Army combat fitness test, which is, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's basically a hex bar deadlift. They have a standing power throw, which is what they call it.
Where you throw like a medicine ball or something? Is that what they're throwing?
Yeah, you throw a medicine ball over your head.
Okay, got it.
Hand release push up, a sprint, drag, carry. It's kind of like this circuit, essentially. A leg tuck and a 2-mile run. They kept the 2-mile run in there.
Okay. So it looks a little more like the NFL Combine, as opposed to the old school physical fitness test.
It's a step in the right direction, and I think that we could have an entire conversation about the PT tests and where they should be changed and modified. In fact, the last seminar I went to, they talked about it. But I think talking about the PT test is a waste of time because it's just a test. It's a physical test. You don't even do it that much. When you have to do it, it's not that hard. We were trained in the military, and I was in the infantry, so it was a little different than other branches. But I mean, we were taught like, hey, you should be able to take a PT test at any point. Like, you come out of the field, you should be able to take a PT test and pass.
Sure.
You drank way too much last night and you woke up late, or got to wake up real early anyway. You should just go and pass. That's just how it is because it's not that difficult. So, but that aside, the problem is not like the PT tests are a part of it, but the problem is the day-to-day operations That's what nobody talks about. It's the day-to-day, like PT every day. That's the problem there. And, it's a lack of education from a lot of leaders and the ones implementing the PT plan. So let me break it down for you.
I was going to say, so what does the daily PT regimen look like? And I'm sure it's probably different between the armed forces and being a cop, where I'm sure the daily PT regimen as a cop is
on your own,
is non-existent, right? And in the armed forces looks kind of like what?
So again, speaking from the Army, the platoon leader, which is the first officer in charge of the smallest unit, okay? He is basically in charge of the physical training plan. So he will make a plan, and obviously he talks to his small unit leaders. I mean, he's not just writing it and saying, you are doing this. Like he talks to his squad leaders and stuff like that. But he implements the PT plan. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because you have to submit your PT plan up to your commander for approval, okay? And this is probably the first fundamental problem, and one of the biggest problems is it takes all this training and makes it relative. And what I mean by that is, so Matt, you're the leader of this organization, okay? I'm your platoon leader. You say, Nick, make a PT plan for first platoon. I say, roger that. Write out the PT plan, submit it to you, and you're really into lifting.
Yeah.
So if I have a bunch of running stuff,
right,
and you're going to be like, this is bullshit, and
right.
and you're going to throw it back and go and tell me to go redo it.
Yeah.
So if your commander is a marathon runner, guess what your entire unit is doing?
Well, and the guess, I assume, that most of these commanders are in fact, like, their thing is endurance.
Yeah,
it's probably
or
very
CrossFit.
Right. It's very rare. Well, at least CrossFit is at least another step in the right direction of getting up and running 5 miles every morning, right? But very few, I'm sure, are actually lifters or about strength or about performance specifically. They're like, it's PT, man. What we do is we get up, we put on our little shorty shorts, and we run.
We sweat. And what do we always preach here at Barbell Logic? We always say, if you're going somewhere and doing something and just getting big or getting hot and sweaty and tired, that's not what?
It's not training.
It's not training. So that's what PT is. And as an infantry guy, 5 days a week, an hour and a half in the morning, every morning. That's what it was, unless you were out in some kind of field operation or something. But an hour and a half, and
that's a bunch of time.
That's a lot of time. And here's the other, at least in the unit that I was in, we trained to time. We did not train to standard. So what I mean is, if you're not moving for an hour and a half, you are wrong. So, right. and I know, and anyone that has read any book on training know that that's not how training works.
Right.
That's not how you accomplish certain physical fitness goals. You
right.
know, I mean, like, I'm talking like we would just make stuff up at the end just so like the commander didn't walk by or the first sergeant didn't walk by and was like, why the heck aren't you guys moving? Like, you know, and it's just kind of like, and, I don't want to go down the other path. Like, there are stuff in the Army that's physically challenging that you're just going to have to do and suck it up. And that's just what it is. But we can't, on one hand, say, oh, why isn't our units deployable? Why can't they be deployed? Because they have a 30% injury rate right now to knees, lower backs, hips, and everybody's beat up, and these guys can't deploy. Because that's what it's about. Like, you're training so you can deploy. That's the whole goal. You do everything you do is so you can become like basically like ready to go anywhere.
And let's get rid of the euphemisms, like kill people and break stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, really. I mean, this is all in service of making the serviceman as durable as possible and as efficient at breaking things and killing things as possible.
Right. So the way they do that is, let's throw on a 60-pound ruck and let's run 8 miles.
Right.
And so the question is, and you don't have to get into the hairy details of what you saw or did in Afghanistan, but my guess is that when you were actually in Afghanistan, actually in a war zone, there wasn't a lot of actual practical need in war for putting on a 60-pound ruck and running 8 miles. I'm assuming that didn't happen a lot.
I mean, there are definitely operations in which you're going to move a long distance with heavy weight, but you're not doing it. You're not running it, and this kind of goes back to, when you're in garrison, which means you're back home and you're training up.
Oh, I like that word. I just learned a word. I'm going to say that from now on. When people
In
are
garrison?
like, hey, yeah, they're like, what are you doing right now? What's your training? I'm like, I'm in garrison.
Yeah, you're in garrison operation.
I'm home and I'm training. That's what I'm doing. All right. Shh. I don't want to tell anybody else that word. That's a special word just between us three.
All right. So I'll give you another example. Like deployment readiness, like it basically a bunch of commanders looking at a PowerPoint slide. And there's a series of blocks on there, and they're either like red or green. And this is very dumbed down. But
sure,
basically, like they'll look at a company and they'll go, hey, Bravo company hasn't done a ruck march this month or this quarter. And they're like, oh, crap. Oh, you guys got to do a ruck march.
Right. Red flag. We got to get you ready.
We got to do a ruck march right now. And I mean, I'm not kidding when we've had times where it's like, hey, next week, guys, we're doing a 12-mile ruck march. And although, a 12-mile, the standard is 12 miles in 3 hours. So it's averaging about 15 minutes a mile. And I mean, it's difficult. It's tough, and especially if you haven't been training for it. Could you go out and squeeze it out? Yeah, of course you could. You're tough infantryman. You can do it. However, imagine if you had, 4 months of training for this thing before that day. I mean, like,
sure,
you're going from like getting across the finish line to ow, my ankle, ow, my Achilles heel, to running across it and finishing it just fine with no injuries. So the Army is constantly complaining about, oh, we have so many injuries. Why do we have all these injuries? Why are we now, when guys get out, paying them thousands of dollars from the VA? Well, that's because it all goes down to training. It's all training.
That nobody's actually training. They call it training.
Everyone's exercising.
Right. There's no right.
And that starts, I think that starts at the train. Like what everybody, if you join the Army right now, you have to go through some kind of training, whether you're an officer or enlisted, it doesn't matter. You're going to go through basic, you're going to go through some kind of officer training. You're going to go through whatever additional training they need you to go to. Why at some point can we not sit down and say, hey, this is programming, guys. This is how you do it. And especially as when I was a leader, I was a small unit leader. When I went through all the small unit training I did, I learned really well how to do ambushes and raids and all kinds of stuff. But not one time did we go over like, hey, this is how we structure a PT plan. But that was part of my job requirement.
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to that relativity. I was structuring it off of what I knew. So yeah, I was trying to get my guys to squat and deadlift and do stuff. But, the minute I pass that up to a commander, they're like, why the hell are we doing all this barbell shit? And unless I got lucky, I had one commander and he liked to lift. And I was like, yeah, sweet. So I get my guys to lift. But that's just sad that it has to be like that. I got to play mommy and daddy, to kind of get these guys the training that they need.
It sounds like training, even before we actually develop the program or the training itself, has to start with a goal. And it sounds to me like there is some confusion about what the ultimate goal is to like, okay, if we're trying to make a soldier, like we're trying to make somebody who's going to go kill people and break shit. Like we're going to go defend our country. What does that person look like? I'm trying to train stone cold killers. I'm trying to train these, like they're soldiers. They're like that idea of these are machines. I'm trying to make a machine, right? I'm trying to take a human and turn them into a machine. And so until we define that goal of what that needs to be, how can you even lay out a training program at all? And so somehow this thing seems to be passed down through layers and layers of bureaucracy that's like, well, like if the guys can just run for 8 miles, or throw on a ruck and march for 12 miles like that. Yeah, you go like, wait a minute, like, what are we doing? We're not marching across Normandy anymore. Like, that's not the way war is fought. So what do we need to do? And so what do you think are the goals? Like, what would make a really good soldier? Like, if you set the standards and you were saying, okay, this is the goal that we're going to work towards, and then we can start to work back, because that's what we do. That's what we do. And so what do you think the ultimate goal is for these soldiers? What are some of those standards? What should they be so that they know how to train for those things?
I think looking at it from like a top level commander's point of view is that, like I said, they care about deployment readiness.
Yeah.
So they want to know that their platoon you're always going to have injuries, right?
Sure.
No matter what. I mean, if you're pushing your body at any kind of level, you're just going to have injuries. It's just I mean, we're doing barbell training here. I mean, how many injuries are we working through? Like,
yep.
From us personally and clients too. But it's about deployment readiness. So the training needs to be structured in such a way that it makes sense so they don't hurt themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's probably not smart to announce, hey, we're doing a 12-mile ruck march next week. Somebody's going to roll an ankle and break it.
It would be just as stupid to announce, hey, we're going to do a max squat, 1 rep max next week. And they're like, oh, I haven't been squatting. Like, that's a recipe for disaster.
And it's just because they're trying to say, yes, we did 4 ruck marches this year quarterly. And it's like, well, why don't you just say, hey, we messed up. We can't do 4. We're going to do 2 or 3 this year, but we're going to train up. Because what is it about? Is it about checking that little block?
Yes, that's what it's about.
Yes, exactly.
That's the problem.
That's the problem. But if you say it like out loud, is it about checking that block, or is it about keeping your soldiers healthy so they can deploy? They'd be like, well, obviously to deploy, but then you sit in a meeting and then they're like, there's a red block on the screen.
That's right.
And they're like, why is there a red block on the screen? And you're like, well, we're trying to do this so we're not hurting our dudes. And, you ask, like, how do you make a really badass soldier? Right.
Yeah.
Well, we could sit here and talk about that all day, Matt. Like, we could say, okay, we're going to get them squatting to this number and running at this speed, at this distance, or whatever. But I think that we should start at the back and say, well, how do we just make them so they're not injured as much?
Sure.
How do we take the VA payments and make them, instead of last year, millions of dollars going out to the VA because of these guys that are permanently injured now? How do we reduce that? Let's figure that out first.
Yeah.
Because that's what's happening right now.
Well, and for these, and I'm sure you had some commanders and some guys that were above you that were incredible soldiers that understood strategy about wartime efforts.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing you're moving towards is, guys, why are we not outsourcing the strength and the conditioning and the physical fitness training to professionals that actually know what the fuck they're doing here? Like, I wouldn't come on in, and we coach tons of people at BLOC who are in law enforcement, fire, armed services. We don't try to teach them how to be better soldiers, better cops, better firefighters, because I don't have any idea how that stuff works.
And you don't have to be, if somebody comes to you as a client and they're a tennis player or they do bowling whatever, you don't have to have done those things in order to teach them how to get strong.
That's right, because that's what we do. That's
exactly. Right. So I don't understand why in these organizations all of a sudden it's like, if your experience is more than mine, meaning you have more rank, more time on whatever than me, then you automatically know more about strength training, physical fitness, whatever than me. That doesn't make sense.
Right.
And it's real. Like, I'll switch over to the law enforcement side of things. I took a course this year before I got out called the Tactical Athlete course. And I was like, oh man, I'm taking this. I'm all over it.
Fuck yeah. Tactical Athlete. That sounds badass.
It's right. It sounds badass. Right. And I knew it was going to be exactly what it was. But I remember in the class, the instructor, when he would raise his hand or when he'd ask a question, I would try not to answer it, but he would look at me because he kind of knew that I knew this stuff. And there was a point where we're in the gym and he's he's got this older guy, a cop, and he's trying to do an air squat, okay, and the guy can't get down to parallel. He can't even get to depth. So the instructor says, "Okay, hold on," and he takes him near, I think it was some kind of machine, and he has him hold on to the machine with his hands, 2 hands on the machine, and he says, "Now squat." And he squats down all the way, and his like hamstrings are on his calves. And he's like, "See, you can do a full squat. You have the range of motion to do a full squat."
Right.
And I'm just like, I'm like sitting in the back, like losing it, obviously.
Yeah. And then did that guy get a diploma at the end that said that he in fact was a tactical athlete?
Yes.
Of course he did.
Hell yes, Matt.
And that guy's like, it's hanging on his wall, man.
Yeah. And he's like, now I know some stuff, and
right.
So, but that just goes to show you, like, we could sit here and pick that apart all day and how it's not a squat and what happens if he lets go of the pole and, all that stuff. But the reality is that somebody told him that's a squat.
Yeah.
So let's find that guy, and somebody told that guy that's a squat. So it goes back to the lack of education. There's no training if part of your job responsibility is you have to know infantry tactics. You have to know the law if you're a cop. You have to know how to, put out a certain fire in a certain room, of a certain building. And then on top of that, you also you have to now know how to physically train people to do those job tasks, but there's no training in how to do that. During the academy in the police department, like they had a little like week long of like health stuff, but it was like, eat your vegetables and drink milk that's 1%, and like
well, I mean, do you think we're so emotional about this because for us three, and for a lot of people who are listening to the podcast, and for all of our coaches at Barbell Logic, we've dedicated our lives to becoming professionals in this area.
Yeah.
And so, and then whether that's the armed forces, or whether that's law enforcement, or whether that's high school football, or whether that's your general practitioner, that every single time you hear like about an exercise program, well, you better go check with your doctor first before you start this exercise program. And that doctor, it's the same situation. The doctor has never had training on strength and conditioning exercise programming. And then it gets even worse. Then in fact, if you have had training at the division, at the college level, and you have an exercise science degree, an exercise physiology degree, it's bullshit because it's wrong. Like the whole system is completely and utterly broken. And so I think that's why we're so passionate about this. And so regardless of where you're at, so, I can remember that the guy I was talking about that was my training partner, who is super passionate about strength training. The guy's incredibly smart, super smart guy when it comes to training and fitness. And he's a football coach, so he's passionate about football as well. And it just kills him that football is so uneducated about strength and conditioning. Now, here you are, you're coming from this armed forces, law enforcement background. It's the same thing. You're like, I care about this, and this matters far more than football players do. Like football kids are playing a game. You are you're protecting, like our law enforcement, our cops, our first responders. They're here to protect and save the lives of our people at home, and our army and armed forces are here to protect us abroad, and they don't know what they're doing, right? And our doctors are here to try to save people's lives and improve their quality of lives, and they don't know what they're doing when it comes to this specific thing, right? And it's broken. It's a problem.
I think the bigger problem here is that all of these organizations we're talking about, their unspoken actual goals are different than the stated public goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
So I say that the military's purpose is to break things and kill people, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's a social experimentation organ. Maybe it's a civil service organization that provides pensions and career advancement for a certain class of people. Maybe it's a social club to some degree. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on there that is contrary to, breaking shit and killing people. And I think that as long as these unspoken true goals that are contrary to what we think their goals are still exist, nothing's going to change.
Sure.
Nothing's going to change.
Yeah, you've got your just like you've got your 545 50
Right.
is works in the military too, right? You've got this small percentage of guys, and I'm sure it's actually way less than 5%. You know, you got your Delta Force guys, you got your SEALs, who are no shit killers. When we have to go in and kill Osama bin Laden, they're not throwing the grunts in. Like, it's like, listen, we've got actually no shit killers, the exact type of people you're talking about. But the percentage of those people that are in the armed forces, my guess, is so insanely low that, Scott, you're probably right. That for
So
the vast
what is the
majority of these guys,
purpose?
it's like, hey, we got these 18-year-old kids, and they're not really college material. And I don't say that like, hey, listen, like some of those guys are like they're called to go do this thing. So I don't mean that it's lesser. As a matter of fact, you and I, Scott and I, especially our listeners, know we ain't pro college. So it's but it's this like let's just it seems like the right thing to do. Let's just push them forward into the armed services and let's let them do this thing. And it's just sort of social experiment.
It's this career path.
Yeah, right. It's a career path for someone who can't go be an engineer
Or doesn't want to be. I mean, that's fine.
or doesn't want to be. That's
It
right.
doesn't want to be. But yeah,
And then same thing in law enforcement, right? Like you get all these guys that have no business, and ladies, everybody, have no business actually being a cop.
holy smoke! Like if you see a Tulsa County sheriff, oh my god! I mean, it's just clear that he's not protecting anybody.
Yeah, it's what's sad about that, Scott, is like everybody knows it. Like it's like I tell you, I had to respond to a guy might have run into a Krispy Kreme donuts, and I'm like in uniform, and like it was like me and another guy. I was like, dude, I'm not going in there.
You're not going to go defend the donut shop.
I'm not going in there. And they're like, why not? I was like, because I already know somebody's going to say something. I went in, and sure as shit, somebody was like, oh my God, a cop in a donut shop. Can I take a picture?
Thing.
But,
yeah.
you know, it's a funny joke, and we joke around about it. But here's reality. That fat sheriff you just talked about, Scott, that dude might have to save your life one day.
Right.
You know, and who do you want showing up at your door? You want some tattooed badass who kicks in the door and takes the guy by the ears and throws him out the window?
Yes.
You know? Yes. Everybody wants that guy. Every single person wants that guy. And I 100% agree with both of you. And the reality of any law enforcement, fire department, EMT, their job is to protect people. So your physical fitness matters. Your physical strength matters. The training that you do, both physically and skill-based training, matter. At some point, we're going to have to start taking it seriously. And you know, it's like, oh, look at that fat cop. It's like that's sad. It's sad that we just we accept it.
Yeah, it's
unacceptable in my book.
It's probably not going to happen, Nick.
I know.
But I think that individual servicemen and individual police officers and such that listen to this can do something about that for themselves, and they can go train hard to be stronger and more durable and more efficient. And you're going to have to take that on themselves. It's their own responsibility, because if they wait for it to come down from the top, their whole career they will have already retired. Their whole career arc will have played out before the
it's because it's bureaucracy
changes.
And it's slow.
Yeah. So Nick, your practical solution that I heard, you know, we've fleshed out the problem, and your practical solution is that you hire out professionals, but that we all know that actually can't be done. And listen, Godspeed if you want to be the guy that tries to get in there and reform that and change that at a macro level. But what Scott is saying is that the solution is actually what you're saying is correct, but it's going to have to happen at the micro level. It's going to have to happen at the individual level. These guys who, if you are a cop, if you are a firefighter, if you are a first responder, if you are in the armed forces, like, it is your responsibility, not your platoon leaders, not the government's, to turn you into a killer, because they won't, because they're going to fail. And so you need to hire the professional. You need to seek the help to be the stone cold killer that you're supposed to be. And that's what you're going to have to do at a practical level.
Soldiers, law enforcement, EMT, whatever, they need to start training on their own. They need to make this stuff up on their own, and they need to seek help to do it. Don't think that you can just do it by yourself. You know, everybody needs a coach. We always preach that. But the global solution, the big, like if we're talking global versus local, the global solution is that, you know, the organization hires somebody out and they start bringing professionals in, consultants, and then they start remodeling the whole thing. That would be really nice, but that's probably not going to happen.
Well, I mean, the only answer is one person at a time.
Yep.
Is all you can do, right? This is about personal responsibility. And so if that's it extends obviously beyond just law enforcement, first responders, and armed forces. Like everybody's listening to this podcast. You have a personal responsibility to be prepared for what life is going to throw at you. We're not strength alone. We're strength first. That's what we do, because we know strength gives you the biggest bang for your buck. And then after that, man, you better be prepared for what life is going to throw at you.
Yeah. Just because you are in the military or a cop doesn't mean you have to abrogate your personal responsibility to your mission there.
Right.
So, go deadlift heavy and go squat heavy. Do your conditioning. Be ready for that foot pace. But when you get hold of that guy, you need to be double overhand in 405, because he ain't going to get away from you if you've been doing that.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
We're tilting at windmills, y'all.
No. Yeah.
But where can people find you, Nick? I know where they can find you.
Yeah, I mean, they can email me at nkoldewey@barbelllogic.com.
Tell them a little bit. You are at Barbell Logic. What do you do for us?
I am at Barbell Logic. I am an intern with Barbell Logic. I've been an intern with you guys for, I think it's coming up on a year now.
Yeah.
I was a client first. Now I'm an intern. Got promoted.
I want you to look at the camera right now, and I want you to both pose. And,
Pose?
Yeah.
Like, should I take my shirt off or what?
Because whatever you'd like. Let's get okay. I need to pose
look
here.
at the camera.
Yeah.
Are we smiling?
Boom. Let me do another one. Let's see another one. Hang on.
I think he's saying that we look similar.
You definitely look like could be.
Like it could be.
Nick's your bastard kid.
I'm not old enough for Nick to be a bastard kid. He's just
How old are you, Nick?
my little brother.
I'm 28.
Yeah, you are.
What? I had to be 12. I already told the world I didn't hit puberty till 17. There was no way there was any sperm coming out of me at 12.
God. Gross. There's another Barbell Logic podcast, you people. Thanks so much for listening. Please send your questions to questions@barbell-logic.com. Don't send me questions about training for your PT test. Go barbell train. You know what the answer is. Go barbell train.
Yeah.
And go leave us a review on iTunes. All of you firefighters that hated what I said at the beginning of this, go over there and leave that.
By the way, let me just say, look, we've got some great firefighters at Barbell Logic. So we're talking really about a macro problem, but I want to be clear. There are a bunch of people who are our clients, who are firefighters, cops, first responders, soldiers, who have taken that step. As a matter of fact, one of our biggest international presence. We have a big international presence at Barbell Logic Online Coaching, and it's primarily with overseas deployed soldiers. And so we've got a bunch of soldiers that are off in these third world countries who still have access to some basic internet on their cell phone, and are able to get coaching in these weird middle of nowhere places. And they've done that. So I want to be clear that we're not throwing everybody under the bus. Or there's a whole bunch of phenomenal clients we have that have taken that step because it's all they've got. Like, they don't have access to a coach in Qatar, what is it called? Anyway, so, or whatever, right? And so you know, or like they're just all over the world. And so, yeah, you take that responsibility, man. Step up, you guys, and hire yourself a coach. That doesn't mean it has to be us. There are good coaches out there. Go hire yourself a good coach.
Yeah, it has to be us. The end. Talk to you guys in a few days.